He wasn't supposed to make it through the next 5 minutes. Not out here. Not alone. Not with the cold pressing in like a silent tide and the earth beneath him still holding the last chill of a fading autumn day. Daniel Hayes collapsed without warning, one moment upright, boots crunching along a narrow forest trail just outside a quiet Montana town. The next, gone, as if someone had pulled the strength right out of his bones. His body hit the ground with a dull, final weight, the kind that doesn't echo, the kind that feels like an ending. The wind moved first. It slipped through the pines in a low whisper, carrying the scent of damp soil and distant wood smoke, brushing across his unmoving form as though testing whether he still belonged to the world of the living. 58 years old, retired Marine, a man who had outlived deserts, storms, and the kind of nights that carved themselves into memory like scars, now laid still by something no battlefield ever prepared him for. A quiet failure, a sudden absence, no warning, no enemy, just silence. And beside him, standing perfectly still, was Rex. The German shepherd didn't bark. Not yet. His ears stood forward, alert, catching every shift in the wind, every distant rustle, but his eyes were locked on the man who hadn't moved since he fell. The bond between them wasn't loud or showy. It had been built in long drives, in quiet mornings, in the steady rhythm of shared routine after both had left service behind. Daniel never called Rex a hero, just a good dog. But Rex had seen enough to know when something was wrong. And this was wrong in a way he had never felt before. He stepped closer, paws soft against the brittle leaves, nose lowering to Daniel's face. A breath. Faint. Too faint. Rex nudged him once, gently, as if this were just another nap that needed interrupting. No response. The dog's body stiffened, not in fear, but in recognition. Somewhere deep in instinct, deeper than training, deeper than commands, something shifted. The forest around them felt wider now, emptier. The trail stretched out in both directions with no sign of movement, no distant voices, no passing footsteps. Just miles of quiet land. And a man who should have been standing, but wasn't. Rex circled once, slow, measured, eyes never leaving Daniel. His tail lowered, not tucked in fear, but heavy with something harder to name. The wind picked up again, colder now, threading through his coat, carrying a distant sound. A truck maybe, miles away, too far to matter. Rex paused, listened, then looked back at Daniel. There was a command buried in his memory. Stay? It had been said 100 times. Stay when it mattered. Stay no matter what. But this moment didn't feel like the others. This moment didn't feel like something you stayed through. He leaned down again, pressing his nose against Daniel's cheek, breathing in the familiar scent, sweat, leather, the faint trace of coffee from hours earlier. Still there. Still him. But fading. The kind of fading you couldn't see, only feel. Rex let out a low sound. Not quite a whine. Not quite a growl. Something caught in between. A question without words. He stepped back, then forward again. Unsure. The world suddenly too big. The rules suddenly unclear. The man who had always led wasn't leading anymore. And for the first time, Rex had to decide something on his own. The sky above shifted from pale blue to a deeper gray, shadows stretching longer across the trail. Time was moving, faster than it should. Rex's chest rose and fell, breath steady but tightening, his gaze flicking once toward the distant path ahead, then back to Daniel. Stay or go. Obey or act. The silence didn't answer him. It never does. And somewhere between that silence and the steady, fading rhythm of the man on the ground, a choice began to form. Before we begin, tell me, where are witching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Rex did not run immediately. That would have been instinct, panic, something wild and uncontrolled. But this was not that. This was slower. He stood over Daniel for one more second, maybe two, measuring something invisible, something that lived between heartbeat and silence. The wind pressed through the trees again, colder now, slipping under his coat and raising the fur along his spine. He lowered his head once more, pressing, his nose firmly against Daniel's neck, searching for that steady rhythm he had always trusted. It was there, but faint, like a distant echo carried over miles. Not enough. Not for long. Rex stepped back, his paws shifting against the dry leaves, and for a moment he looked down the trail behind them, the way they had come. It stretched narrow and empty, bending out of sight between tall pines and shadowed undergrowth. No movement, no voices, no help. He turned his head the other way, toward the open stretch ahead where the trees thinned slightly, toward a gravel access road nearly half a mile away. He knew that road. They had walked it before. Trucks passed there sometimes. People, not often, but enough. His ears twitched, catching the faintest sound, something low and distant, maybe an engine carried on the wind, maybe nothing at all. He looked back at Daniel again. The man's chest rose unevenly, each breath shallow, spaced too far apart. Rex moved closer once more, nudging Daniel's shoulder with more urgency now. Not gentle anymore, but not rough either. A push that carried insistence. Wake up. Come on. Move. Nothing. The stillness did not break. Rex let out a short, sharp bark, the sound cutting clean through the trees, but it faded quickly into the vast quiet around them. No answer came back. The forest swallowed it whole. His body tensed, not in fear, but in decision forming. There was a memory, not a clear one, but a feeling, a pattern built from years beside this man. When something went wrong, Daniel moved. He acted. He adapted. He did not wait. Rex's eyes shifted again toward the distant road, then back to the unmoving figure at his feet. Stay had always meant loyalty. Stay had always meant safety. But this did not feel like safety anymore. This felt like the edge of something slipping away. He circled Daniel once, tighter this time, faster, as if tracing the outline of the moment, committing it to something deeper than thought. Then he stopped, completely still. The world seemed to pause with him. Even the wind softened, as if waiting. Rex inhaled slowly, deeply, pulling in the scent of the trail, the trees, the distant trace of oil and dust that hinted at the road beyond. His head lifted. His posture changed. Not hesitation anymore. Direction. He stepped away from Daniel, one pace, then another, each movement deliberate, controlled. After 3 steps, he stopped again and turned back, eyes locking onto the man one more time. It was not confusion now. It was something closer to resolve, something that carried weight. If he left, there would be no one here. No one to watch. No one to guard. But if he stayed, nothing would change. The choice was no longer between right and wrong. It was between action and silence. Rex exhaled through his nose, a low sound, almost steadying himself. Then he turned fully toward the trail ahead. His muscles coiled beneath his coat, energy gathering not from fear, but from purpose. And then he moved. Not running wild, not frantic, but fast and focused, weaving between trees with a precision that came from years of following commands, now repurposed into something his own. The forest blurred slightly around him as he picked up speed, paws striking earth in a steady rhythm, each step carrying him farther from the man he had never left before. Branches brushed against his sides, leaves cracked underfoot, the scent of the road growing stronger with every yard. Behind him, the trail fell quiet again, holding Daniel in its stillness. Ahead, the world widened. Rex did not look back again, because something inside him understood that looking back would slow him down. And time was no longer something they had to spare. Rex ran until the forest began to thin and the shadows loosened their grip on the ground beneath his paws, the scent of dust and gravel sharpening in the air with every stride as the narrow trail widened just enough to hint at the road ahead. And yet when he broke through the final line of trees and reached the edge of that pale stretch of gravel, the world did not greet him with urgency. It greeted him with indifference. The road lay empty beneath a sky that had begun to dim into late afternoon, the kind of hour when people were already home or nearly there, engines silent, doors closed, lives moving on without noticing what had just been left behind in the woods. Rex slowed but did not stop, his chest rising harder now, breath visible in the cooling air, his eyes scanning left, then right, searching for movement, for sound, for anything that could become help. And for a moment there was nothing, just the distant hum of wind and the faint creak of trees behind him. And then somewhere far down the road, so faint it could have been imagined, came the low vibration of an engine, not close, not certain, but enough. Rex froze, ears lifting, body angled toward the sound, and then he moved again, stepping out onto the gravel, paws crunching against the small stones as he ran toward the direction of that distant noise, his pace quickening, not frantic but driven, each movement sharpened by something deeper than instinct, something that remembered the way Daniel had always moved toward problems instead of away from them. And then the sound grew clearer, an old pickup truck rounding a bend nearly 200 yards away, its tires humming against the road, steady and unaware. Rex did not hesitate. He stepped fully into the path, positioning himself squarely in the middle of the road, his body tall, still, waiting. The truck continued forward at a modest speed, the driver not yet recognizing what stood ahead, until the distance closed and the shape of the dog became undeniable. The truck slowed, brakes easing, gravel shifting beneath the tires, and finally stopped several yards away. The engine idling low, a man inside leaning forward over the steering wheel. Confused, cautious, his window still rolled up, Rex did not bark wildly or circle in panic. Instead, he held his ground, eyes locked onto the man, then stepped closer, then stopped again, as if measuring the space between them. The driver cracked the window slightly, his voice cautious, uncertain, asking, "What are you doing out here?" But Rex did not respond with sound. He turned his head sharply back toward the forest, then looked again at the man, then back again, a motion repeated with purpose. Not random, not afraid, something deliberate, something that asked to be understood. The man frowned, studying him, seeing past the surface, noticing the tension in the dog's posture, the urgency held tightly beneath control, and something shifted in his expression, curiosity turning into concern. He opened the door slowly and stepped out, boots hitting gravel, the air carrying the faint scent of gasoline and worn leather. Rex stepped closer now, not aggressive, not hesitant, and then turned fully toward the trail again, taking a few steps, stopping, looking back, waiting. The man hesitated only a second longer before speaking under his breath. "All right, show me." And that was enough. Rex moved immediately, faster now, guiding without looking back too often, trusting that the man would follow, weaving off the road and back into the narrow path between the trees, the man behind him pushing through branches, breath heavier, trying to keep pace, the forest swallowing them again as light dimmed and the distance closed. And with every step Rex took deeper into the woods, the space between help and silence began to narrow, but behind them, the truck still idled on the empty road, engine running, as if even it understood that something important had just begun. The forest closed around them again, thicker now, darker, the light filtering through the tall pines in thin, fading streaks that barely touched the ground as Rex moved ahead with unwavering direction, his body low and efficient, weaving through the familiar path as if he had memorized every route and bend. While behind him the man pushed forward with growing urgency, branches brushing against his jacket, breath coming faster, boots slipping slightly on loose earth but never stopping, because something in the way the dog moved made it impossible to turn back. It was not panic that led him, it was purpose, and purpose has a way of pulling others with it. The distance between them stretched and closed in waves, Rex slowing just enough at turns to make sure he was still being followed, then surging forward again, deeper, faster, as the air cooled and the quiet thickened into something heavier, something that pressed against the ears, until finally Rex slowed, not gradually, but all at once, his body stopping at the edge of a small clearing just off the trail, a place where the ground flattened and the trees gave way just enough to reveal what lay beneath them. Daniel, still where he had fallen, unchanged, unmoving, as if time had decided not to touch him at all while everything else continued on. The man behind Rex stepped into the clearing and stopped just as suddenly, the shift in his posture immediate, confusion giving way to recognition as he took in the scene, a body on the ground, still, too still, the air around it carrying that unmistakable weight that does not need words to be understood. He moved forward quickly now, dropping to one knee beside Daniel, his hand hovering for a brief second before reaching out, checking for a response, a breath, anything that could answer the silent question hanging in the space between them. Rex stood just a few feet away, watching, not interfering, not pacing, just watching with an intensity that felt almost human, as if everything now depended on what this man would do next. The man leaned closer, his ear near Daniel's mouth, his hand steady but urgent against his chest, searching, waiting, and then he exhaled, not relief exactly, but not despair either, something in between, He reached into his pocket quickly, pulling out his phone, hands moving with practiced efficiency, dialing, speaking in a voice that was controlled but edged with urgency, giving directions, describing the location, glancing once at Rex as if confirming the reality of what had just happened. The forest remained quiet around them, but it was no longer the same. Quiet, it was charged now, alive with the possibility that something could still change. The man shifted slightly, adjusting Daniel's position carefully, doing what little he could while waiting, his movements deliberate, respectful, as if aware that he was holding a moment balanced on the edge of something fragile. Rex took a step closer then, just one, his eyes fixed on Daniel's face, watching for any sign, any movement, any return, but nothing came, only the slow, faint rise and fall that seemed too small to matter and yet meant everything. Time stretched, seconds pulling long, the distant sound of sirens not yet present but somehow already expected, and in that space between what had been and what might still be, Rex lowered himself slightly to the ground, not lying down fully, not relaxing, but anchoring himself there, as if refusing to let the moment drift any further. The man glanced at him again, a brief look that carried understanding, something unspoken passing between them. You did this, you brought me here, and now we wait. The wind moved once more through the trees, softer now, carrying with it the faintest hint of something distant approaching, not yet visible, not yet certain, but enough to shift the air, enough to suggest that help was no longer just an idea. And still Rex did not move, his gaze steady, unwavering, fixed on the man who had once led him through everything, now waiting to be led back. The sound came before the light, faint at first, barely more than a tremor beneath the stillness. A distant wail carried thin through miles of trees, rising and falling like something uncertain whether it would arrive in time. The man beside Daniel lifted his head slightly, listening, his expression tightening not with fear, but with focus, as if measuring the distance between that sound and the breath that struggled beneath his hand. Rex heard it too. His ears shifted forward, body stiffening, not in alarm, but in recognition. Help was coming, but not yet. Not close enough. Not fast enough. The space between now and then still mattered. The man moved quickly, adjusting his position, his hands steady as he worked with quiet urgency, speaking low, almost to himself, as if the sound of a voice could hold the moment together. Stay with me, he said, not commanding, not demanding, just asking, as though Daniel might hear him somewhere deeper than consciousness. Rex stepped closer, his nose hovering near Daniel's hand, not touching it first, just there, present, breathing in the faint scent that still remained. The air had shifted again, cooler now, the light thinning into that fragile gray that lives between day and night, when everything feels suspended. Seconds stretched. The distant siren grew louder, then softer as it curved along unseen roads, then louder again, closer now, real. The man exhaled once, controlled, then reached again for his phone, speaking briefly, confirming location, voice sharper now, clearer, pulling help the rest of the way toward them. Rex lowered his head finally, pressing it gently against Daniel's arm, not pushing, not nudging, just resting there as if anchoring something invisible, something slipping. His body was still, but inside him everything was moving, every instinct awake, every sense tuned to the fragile rhythm beneath him. The man glanced at him again, and this time there was no confusion in his eyes, only understanding, the kind that does not need explanation. You brought me here. You did not leave him. The siren grew louder still, cutting through the trees now, no longer distant, no longer uncertain. Then came another sound, tires over gravel somewhere beyond the forest, doors opening, voices calling out, sharp, professional, moving quickly toward the clearing. The man stood partially, waving, calling back, guiding them in, his voice steady but urgent. Over here. This way, hurry. Branches cracked in the distance as the responders moved through the trees, their steps fast but controlled, the rhythm of people who had done this before, who understood the narrow space between seconds and outcomes. Rex lifted his head but did not move away. He stayed where he was, his body close, his eyes fixed on Daniel, as if unwilling to break the connection even now. The first responder broke into the clearing, followed by another, their presence immediate, focused, kneeling beside Daniel, hands moving with practiced precision, voices low but clear, checking, assessing, acting. The man stepped back slightly, giving them space, but his gaze never left the scene. Rex remained still for a moment longer, then slowly stepped back just enough to allow them to work, but not far, never far. The world narrowed to the small circle of movement around Daniel, the responders working, the air filled now with purpose instead of silence. A brief pause, a held breath. Then one of them nodded, just once, a small motion, but enough. Something had been found. Something still there. The stretcher came in, unfolded quickly, the process moving forward with quiet urgency, lifting carefully, securing, preparing to move. Rex watched every second, his body tense but controlled, as if memorizing it all, as if making sure nothing was missed. The man stepped closer again, one hand resting briefly on Rex's back, not restraining, not guiding, just there, a silent acknowledgement of what had been done. The siren was no longer distant now. It was right there, waiting. And as they began to carry Daniel out of the clearing, through the trees, back toward the world that still had a chance to hold him, Rex followed, step for step, not leading this time, not deciding, just staying close, because this part, this fragile, moving moment, was not finished yet. The transition from forest to road happened quickly, almost too quickly for the weight of the moment it carried, as the responders moved with steady coordination, lifting Daniel through the narrow path, while branches brushed against their jackets and boots pressed deep into the soft earth, and Rex stayed close, never ahead now, never leading, just following with quiet intensity, his eyes locked on the shape of the man being carried, as if every step mattered, as if distance itself had become something fragile that could not be trusted. The edge of the trees broke open again, and the gravel road came into view, pale under the dimming sky, the ambulance waiting there with its lights turning slow and rhythmic, casting flashes of red and white across the trunks of the surrounding pines. Not harsh, not chaotic, just steady, like a heartbeat made visible, the rear doors already open, equipment laid out with purpose. The responders lifting Daniel inside with careful precision, there. Movements practiced but not rushed, because rushing here did not mean speed. It meant losing control, and control was everything in moments like this. Rex stopped just short of the vehicle, his paws at the edge of the gravel, watching, ears forward, body still, as if trying to understand this new boundary. The man who had followed him stepped beside him, one hand resting briefly along Rex's back again, not holding him, just grounding himself as much as the dog. They exchanged no words, but something had already been said between them, something. Complete. The doors of the ambulance remained open for a moment longer as the responders worked inside, voices low but clear, confirming, adjusting, securing. The air filled with the scent of antiseptic and metal, foreign against the natural quiet that had surrounded them only minutes before. Rex took one step closer, then another, stopping just at the threshold, his gaze never leaving Daniel. The faint rise and fall still there, still present, still enough to hold on to. One of the responders glanced toward him briefly, not dismissing him, not pushing him away, just acknowledging, as if understanding that this presence was not something to be removed, but something to be respected. The man spoke then, quietly, asking if the dog could come, his voice carrying that same steady urgency that had brought him into the forest. And there was a brief pause, a look exchanged, a decision made without words. The kind that does not appear in any manual but lives in moments like this. The answer was not spoken out loud, but the space was not closed, the door was not shut immediately, and that was enough. Rex stepped forward carefully, not jumping, not rushing, just entering, settling himself low near the edge, out of the way, but present, always present. The doors closed then with a firm, final sound, sealing the space, and the world outside fell quiet again as the engine shifted. The vehicle turning slightly on the gravel before beginning to move, the road stretching ahead under the fading light, the forest slipping away behind them. Inside the ambulance the rhythm changed, the motion steady but alive, the responders continuing their work with focused calm, checking, monitoring, adjusting, each movement purposeful, each second measured. Rex remained still, his body low, his breathing steadying now, but his eyes never leaving Daniel's face, watching for something, anything, a sign that the man who had always been there was still within reach, the man who had followed them. Stood outside for a moment longer as the vehicle pulled away, watching it disappear down the road, then exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering, the tension releasing in small increments, not all at once. Never all at once, because some moments do not end when the immediate danger passes, they linger, they settle, they stay with you. And as the ambulance carried Daniel forward into whatever came next, Rex stayed exactly where he had chosen to be, close, steady, silent, because for him, this was not the end of anything. It was simply the next part of staying. The ride did not feel fast, even though the ambulance moved steadily along the winding road, its tires humming against the pavement as the last light of day faded into a deepening blue outside, the world beyond the windows slipping into shadow while inside everything narrowed to the quiet urgency of breath and time. The responders worked with calm precision, their voices low, measured, never rushed, as if speed lived not in movement but in clarity, in knowing exactly what mattered and what did not. Daniel lay still on the stretcher, his face pale but not empty, something still there beneath the surface, something holding, and Rex stayed close at the edge, his body tucked low against the metal floor, steady despite the motion, his eyes fixed on the rise and fall that had not disappeared, not yet, the rhythm faint but present, fragile but real, and that was enough. One of the responders glanced toward him again, this time longer, noticing the stillness, the focus, the way the dog did. Not interfere, but did not look away either, as if guarding something unseen, something beyond the physical. And for a brief moment the responder reached out, not to move him, not to push him aside, but simply resting a hand near his shoulder, acknowledging the presence without breaking it. Outside the siren had softened, no longer a distant call, but a controlled signal guiding their path through intersections and quiet roads. The town drawing closer now, lights appearing in the distance like scattered stars, small and steady, the kind of lights that meant people, homes, life continuing. And inside that moving space, time stretched again, seconds folding into each other, the responders continuing their work, checking, adjusting, watching, always watching. One of them spoke quietly, not to anyone in particular, just stating what was there, what was holding, what still mattered. And the words were simple, but they carried weight, because simple things matter most when everything else falls away. Rex shifted slightly, just enough to adjust his balance as the vehicle turned, but his gaze never broke, never drifted. It stayed anchored, as if he understood that looking away was not an option. Not now, not until something changed. The road straightened, the motion steadied, and then the lights grew brighter, closer, the outline of the hospital coming into view, a structure of glass and concrete rising against the night, quiet but ready. The ambulance slowed, then turned, pulling into the emergency entrance where everything was already in place. Doors opened before the vehicle fully stopped, people waiting, prepared, hands ready. The transition from movement to stillness happening in a single fluid motion. Daniel was lifted again, carried out under the bright overhead lights that erased the shadows of the forest, completely, replacing them with something clinical, clear, immediate. Rex remained where he was for a fraction of a second longer, as if adjusting to the sudden change. Then he stood and stepped forward, following without hesitation as the stretcher moved inside. The doors opened wide, the space beyond filled with voices, movement, purpose, and still he did not falter, did not hesitate, because this was not unfamiliar in feeling. Even if it was new in form, it was still the same thing, staying. And as they moved deeper into the building, past corridors and lights and the quiet urgency of people who understood what seconds meant, Rex followed until the space narrowed again, until a boundary appeared, one that could not be crossed, not this time. And he stopped, not because he wanted to, but because something in the movement around him told him this was where he needed to be now. He stood there, just beyond the threshold, watching as Daniel was taken further in, the distance growing, the connection stretching but not breaking. And for the first time since the moment in the forest, Rex was not beside him, not close enough to touch, but still, he did not leave, because leaving had never been part of the promise. The hospital did not feel like the forest. It did not breathe the same way. The air here was controlled, filtered, steady, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and something clean enough to erase the memory of soil and wind. Rex stood just outside the threshold where he had stopped, his body still, his ears shifting slightly with every new sound that echoed through the corridor. Footsteps, distant voices, the soft roll of wheels moving across polished floors. All of it unfamiliar, all of it constant. Time moved differently here. It did not stretch and bend the way it had beneath the trees. It moved forward in measured steps, quiet but relentless. A nurse passed by, then another, each one glancing briefly at the dog who did not wander, who did not pace, who simply waited as if waiting itself were a task he had been given. The man from the road stood nearby for a while, speaking quietly with someone at the desk, explaining what had happened, his voice calm now. The urgency softened into something steadier, something reflective. He looked back at Rex once, then twice, as if making sure the dog was still there, still holding that same silent line between what had happened and what might come next. Rex did not move toward him. His attention remained fixed down the hallway where Daniel had disappeared, beyond doors that opened and closed with quiet finality. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. There was no clear way to measure it here. The lights above did not dim. The sounds did not fade. Everything continued, and yet for Rex, everything narrowed to a single point, a direction, a place where his eyes returned again and again. At one point, a staff member approached slowly, not with hesitation but with care, crouching just enough to lower her presence, her voice soft, steady, speaking words he did not understand but tone he did. She did not reach for him immediately. She allowed the space to remain. After a moment, she extended her hand slightly, not to guide, not to pull, but to offer something simple, reassurance without expectation. Rex looked at her briefly, then back toward the hallway. He acknowledged her, but he did not shift his purpose. The staff member nodded faintly, as if understanding that this was not something to interrupt, then stood and moved on. Somewhere deeper in the building, a door opened. A stretcher rolled past, not Daniel, someone else, a different story moving through the same space. And Rex watched it pass with a brief flick of attention before returning again to where his focus had settled. The man who had followed him eventually stepped closer once more, kneeling slightly beside him, his voice low, almost thoughtful now, saying "You did good," as if the words themselves were not enough to carry what he meant. Rex did not respond outwardly, but something in his stillness shifted, not relaxation, not relief, just a quiet continuation of the same steady presence he had carried from the forest to here. Then, after what felt like the length of an entire day folded into a single stretch of waiting, a figure appeared at the far end of the hallway, moving toward them with measured steps. Not rushed, not slow, intentional. Rex's ears lifted immediately, his body tightening slightly, not in fear, but in recognition that something was about to change. The man beside him stood as well, his attention drawn forward. The figure approached, stopping just a few feet away, speaking calmly, explaining something in a voice that carried both weight and quiet reassurance. The words were meant for the man, but the tone reached Rex just the same. There was no alarm in it, no urgency left, only something softer, something that did not erase what had happened but did not deepen it either. The man exhaled, a long breath that seemed to release something he had been holding since the moment he stepped into the trees. He nodded once, then looked down at Rex. For the first time since the forest, the tension in the air shifted. Not gone, but changed. The hallway remained the same, the lights steady, the sounds continuing, but something unseen had moved from one side of the moment to the other. And Rex, still standing at that quiet boundary, felt it before anything else was said. The hallway did not grow quieter, but something within it softened, as if the sharp edge of urgency had been set down somewhere just out of sight. And in its place remained a stillness that felt earned, not empty. And Rex stood exactly where he had been, his body steady, his gaze fixed forward as the figure spoke and the man beside him listened, nodding slowly, the kind of nod that carries understanding rather than surprise. And when the figure stepped aside slightly and gestured down the corridor, the space that had once been closed opened just enough, not wide, not fully, but enough, and Rex felt it before he saw it, that subtle shift that called him forward without sound. He moved then, not quickly, not hesitantly, but with a quiet certainty that had guided him from the forest to this place, his paws making no sound against the polished floor as he followed the man down the corridor, past doors that reflected light and clean, pale lines, until they reached a room where the door remained open just enough to reveal what waited inside. Daniel lay there, no longer in the wild stillness of the forest, no longer carried by motion, but resting, held within the steady presence of machines that hummed softly, their sounds rhythmic, consistent, like a new kind of breathing filling the space. His face had changed, not in who he was, but in how the moment held him. The strain softened, the stillness less absolute. Something had returned, not fully, not completely, but enough to be seen. Rex stopped at the threshold for a brief second, as if marking the boundary between what had been and what was now, then stepped forward slowly, each movement measured, careful, respectful of the quiet that filled the room. The man remained just behind him, not entering fully, allowing the space to belong to the bond that had carried them here. Rex approached the bed, his head lowering slightly, his nose drawing in the familiar scent that had never truly left but had been stretched thin across distance and time. And there it was, steady now, grounded, real. His ears shifted, his body easing just a fraction, not relaxing, not yet, but recognizing. Daniel's hand rested at his side, unmoving, but no longer distant, no longer unreachable. And after a moment that seemed to hold more than all the hours before it, Rex stepped closer and gently placed his head against that hand, not pressing, not demanding, just there, present, the contact simple, quiet, but full. The machines continued their steady rhythm. The room remained calm. And then something changed, not loud, not dramatic, just a slight movement, a faint shift of fingers beneath the weight of fur, so small it could have been missed, but Rex did not miss it. His ears lifted, his eyes focusing, his breath pausing for a single beat, then continuing, slower now, steadier, and Daniel's fingers moved again, just barely, enough to confirm what could not yet be spoken. The man behind them exhaled softly, a sound almost lost in the quiet, and for a moment no one moved, because movement would have broken something sacred, something that had arrived without force, without demand, just through presence, through time, through the choice not to leave. Daniel's eyes did not open fully, not yet, but there was a shift there too, a faint awareness surfacing, like light finding its way through a narrow space. And his lips parted slightly, not forming words, just breath, just life returning in small, careful increments. Rex remained exactly where he was, his head still resting against the hand that had once guided him, his body finally easing into something that resembled rest, not because the moment was over, but because it had turned, because the edge they had stood on had given way to something else, something quieter, something that did not need to be named to be understood. And outside the room, the world continued, footsteps passing, voices speaking, lights steady. But inside, time slowed just enough to hold what mattered, and no one said anything, because nothing needed to be said, not here, not now. Some stories do not end in victory. They settle into something gentler, something that lingers in the space between breath and silence. And in that space, Rex did not look away, because he never had, and he never would. In this deeply emotional cinematic journey, a retired Marine collapses alone in the quiet wilderness, and what follows is one of the most powerful animal stories you will ever witness. His loyal German Shepherd senses something is terribly wrong and faces a life-altering decision between obedience and instinct, leading him to run through the forest in search of help just as time begins to slip away. This gripping narrative unfolds with raw realism and heartfelt tension, capturing the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog, while showcasing how courage can come from the most unexpected place. As the German Shepherd finds a stranger on a distant road and guides him back, the story transforms into one of hope, resilience, and quiet miracles, making it one of the most unforgettable animal stories told through a cinematic lens. From the desperate moments on the forest floor to the race against time in the ambulance and the silent waiting inside a hospital, every second carries emotional weight, drawing viewers into a powerful experience that reflects loyalty beyond words. The presence of the retired Marine and his devoted German Shepherd creates a narrative that resonates deeply with fans of animal stories, reminding us that sometimes survival depends not on strength, but on connection and trust. As the story reaches its final moments, a subtle yet profound shift brings a sense of grace rather than victory, where a simple touch becomes more meaningful than any dramatic rescue, reinforcing why stories like this stand among the most moving animal stories ever shared. This is not just a rescue story, but a testament to instinct, faith, and the silent decisions that define life itself, making it a timeless piece for anyone who believes in the extraordinary power found within ordinary moments, and a shining example of the emotional depth that makes animal stories unforgettable.